And they're battening down the hatches. 7 two-man crews prepare to sail around New Zealand. And Kiwis have always considered themselves a nation of yachties. But though our sailors have raced around the world, they've never raced around New Zealand. Well, until now. Tomorrow afternoon, 7 yachts will leave Auckland on the Berocca two-handed round New Zealand race. The first leg will take the fleet around North Cape, down the west coast to Stewart Island. Then it'll head north to Wellington before embarking on the final leg to Auckland. And with just 2 men on board, you want to be sure you're compatible before you set out.
You're going to be spending a lot of time stuck with them. We've got a minimum of probably 6 or 7 days getting down to Stewart Island, and you got to eat together, and well, you're not sleeping together, but you jammed into a little boat. I think that you got to get on pretty well, or there'll be some pretty major fights on board.
Fights shouldn't be a problem. Many will be too tired coping with the same work usually done by 4 or 5-man crews.
It's only up to 2 of you to do all the work, and most of the time only 1 of you to do what a crew of 5 would normally do. So it's a lot harder on you physically, and you tend to get a lot less sleep too.
There was talk 40 yachts being in at the start. In the event, only 7 made it across the line at Auckland. Some say it clashed with other races. Others say the Southern Seas had such a fearsome reputation in the north, most yachties decided to wait and let somebody else do it first. But what a trip they missed. A kite run all the way up the coast, 110 miles in that first 12 hours out. Then the joyride was over. Bouncy headwinds going into the Tasman brought the first casualty of the race. 1 boat forced out, electronics and navigation gone. And then there was another change.
A bit different from yesterday and the night before last, when it was about 2 metre swells and quite choppy and bumpy, and we were getting tossed around quite a lot. And then we wake up this morning and it's just like this.
But head office and the other leader, Provincial Cowboy, struck it lucky. While the rest of the fleet stayed becalmed, the front 2 yachts picked up enough of a breeze to get a handy head start on the run down the west coast to what was always going to be the challenge of any round New Zealand race, getting around the notorious southwest corner. It's an area renowned for storms and unpredictability. And that's what it delivered. An unforecast cyclone that had been chasing the yachts down the Tasman caught them off the Auckland just as they hit a southerly front coming the other way.
Well, here we are. We made it through the night. Shock horror. Quite amazing. Yesterday progressed into being one of the most amazing, exhilarating and frightening rides in my life. Both Steve and I. We spent most of the night through from 8 o'clock through till 2 o'clock in the morning, both sitting on deck, trying to keep the boat under control. We had the small kite up, and we were flying along at speeds in excess of 10 knots all the time, and speeds of up and over 20 knots at times surfing. At one stage this morning, once we'd taken the kite down, we were running just under spinnaker alone, and we were recording boat speeds of 14 and 15 knots under main alone, with 2 reefs in the main doing 14, 15 knots. Quite exhilarating and most exhausting.
The storms were still raging 2 days later, and Provincial Cowboy charged into Half Moon Bay for line honours. But nobody in the fleet seemed too much the worse for wear.
It was a good run up to the Cape, and then we hadn't put a reef in the main until we got to Fiordland around there, and then we had a spinnaker up there, and then within 10 minutes we had 3 reefs in the main, no spinnaker, and it was all on for a day and a half. Winds gusting up to 60 knots, constantly at 50 for a good while. But we've been in worse situations. The boat was never in any danger. We were getting speeds of up to 22 knots out of it, seldom below 15.
2 days in particular when it was really blowing, and we got some speeds up to 20 knots surfing down waves. It was remarkable. You don't get that in Hauraki Gulf. It's really the last night on the way in here where we had the worst blow. It was blowing up around 60, 70 knots, some of the gusts, and we had to reduce down to a storm jib just to slow the boat down going down the waves. We were just surfing down them uncontrollably.
Well, there was 2 swell patterns actually we found, and they're coming together, sort of cresting up, bursting upwards, and then sending off a secondary wave about 90 degrees to them. And that's what caught us down there. We were running with a swell up our stern, and two of them met together, burst and just shot out sideways, and that's what clobbered us down there.
The weather sorted it and put it into perspective of what this race is about, you know, and so it's good to see we got hit around a bit. It wasn't excessive, you know.
This is bound to be remembered as no ordinary race nonetheless. If the nightmarish ride around the southern coast doesn't etch it in people's minds, the fleet's stay on Stewart Island almost certainly will. The island's long been as legendary for the warmth of its hospitality as for its weather.
Everybody's turned up and said hello and offered to help anyway.
The islanders showed they had a thing or two to teach northerners about the sport of sailing as well. While all the yachts survived the storms on the way down, most of them arrived in need of some repairs.
Second day we just told them what was wrong. They all just come down, took it away, come back the next day and she's all fixed.
I mean, a lot of us have had a few bits and pieces we had to repair, and they've gone out of the way to do more than we expected them to do.
It's all good news for Stewart Island and of course for Southland in general. You know, there is life after Wellington, and it's good to see that people can find out about a new world.
Now I hear that you and some of the boys turned on a bit of a party last night.
We had a bit of a soiree in the old South Seas Hotel. Got underway in the early parts of the evening and finished somewhat later. I understand that some people were well into the AM of today. So.
And the night before. And the night before.
Breakwater here on this
and it didn't let up until the very end. The night before the restart for the second leg, there was a quick look at the charts to make sure everybody remembered the way home. But then it was around to the local RSA hall for one last soiree. By morning, the first leg of the first ever yacht race around New Zealand was just another piece of history. The wind was getting up and the race for the north was on, although it seems the future of the race is assured regardless of who ends up being the first across the line back in Auckland.
None of the yachts experienced major problems on the leg through from Stewart Island to Wellington, but after a few days R&R, the final leg was about to begin.
The Wellington weather appears calm in the inner boat harbour, but out beyond the heads, it's a different story. Gusty winds and testing seas place a start in the next stage of the Berocca round New Zealand two-handed yacht race in jeopardy. And for some, it's a time to duck for cover.
Okay, guys, the race committee's decided to postpone the event for, at this stage, 2 hours, and we will look at it every 2 hours. At this, the Condosis and weather forecast here, they're predicting 50 knots in the Straits, so I don't think that any one of you want to start in that. And for safety reasons, you know, I think we should call it off, and let's have a look at it again at 12 o'clock.
A wise decision on a day of strong southerlies. The wind continued to gust up to 50 knots and the big seas were no place for even the most hardened of sailors.
25, maybe 30 foot of sea running in the channel. Make it very uncomfortable go to weather shorthanded. Quite easily verging on dangerous.
Inevitably then a postponement for 24 hours. A necessary safety move, well supported by the crews.
I'd rather be sitting around here than sitting around out there in those winds.
We can go out there and probably most of us would get out, but we've got 600 miles to go to get back to Auckland, and I can't see any point in beating the daylights out of us physically, out of the boat, out of the gear. We've managed to go 1,700 miles so far without doing any major damage. In fact, there's been no major damage on any of the boats.
The weather improves and the race is back on.
Breeze is filled in just slightly, 5 to 7 knots. Good start, Steve?
Yeah.
Craig Torpler and Steve Ashley get the best of the start. In Cannon Head Office, the leader on handicap leads Provincial Cowboy out of the Wellington Heads.
We're just clearing out Wellington Harbour now, still in the lead. Just a fairly substantial swell still running out here with it being so close, but the boat's dropping right out of sight as we bottom out in swells.
But with Provincial Cowboy handy, the lead chopped and changed as the front runners sailed towards Cape Palliser. And loneliness is never a factor at sea, especially when nature's sons and daughters come out to play.
wind's headed us now, it's coming in from northeast actually.
As head office approaches Cape Palliser, there's time to chart the course to the next mark. And the Spirit of New Zealand is a reassuring sight off the east coast. The weather can be both cruel and kind, but this time it's welcome.
55, maybe 60 miles ahead of the rest of the fleet, except the provincial cowboy, which is about 5 miles up ahead.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing for David Aller and his cat, Olsen Everson, who had an unscheduled stop at Napier with rudder troubles.
The boat didn't like it. She got out of control a little bit towards the bottom. Which was sort of, I suppose we call a broach, which puts a lot of weight back onto the rudders. And that's my theory. I think the rudder decided it had enough.
But then a near disaster for head office.
Things have all of a sudden taken a big change for us in the race. We've managed to split the mast from about where the sail is there down the gooseneck. It's not over for us yet. We'll finish, but we've got a hell of a race on our hands.
And with the mast troubles comes the Southern Ocean-like seas, in contrast to what will happen over the final 100-mile run into Auckland.
Only 5 yachts remain in the final leg to Auckland, with the first expected in tomorrow night. Second place, Cannon head office, is continuing under reduced sail with a cracked mast.
We've got some Provincial Cowboy on channel 60 VHF, so we should be okay now, thank you.
Oh, Roger, Cuddy Hank, okay then.
The welcome party is on standby in the early hours of Tuesday morning as Around the Gulf radio contact keeps us up to date with the leaders' positions.
It's all over for the 2 leading boats in the first round New Zealand race. But for one yacht, there were some anxious moments before finishing. Here's Nicola Salmond.
Provincial Cowboy slipped into Auckland Harbour before dawn this morning to take line honours, 8 hours ahead of its nearest rival. But Aucklanders Steve Ashley and Craig Tockler aboard Cannon head office could be equally proud of coming in second. They had to limp home after their mast cracked near Gisborne.
I shouted to Craig, "Craig, get up quick! Losing the mast!" He came up and looked around, said, "Get up there and pull the main down quick," and we just got it down in time.
They lashed the spinnaker pole to the mast and sailed 300 miles without a main, but with their fingers crossed.
We're surprised it's still standing up there. Every time a bit of breeze came through, it'd sort of be standing back here. Oh, is it going to go now? Is it going to go?
The next yacht due home is Southern Huntress. It should cross the line tomorrow morning. Nicola Salmond, One Network News.
Although finishing second, head office looks set to win overall honours on handicap points. But it hasn't been easy. The mast cracked and the crew reinforced it in a desperate bid to prevent it going overboard.
Just before dawn there was a dull bang, and I looked up and the main had all twisted off, and I noticed the mast was bent.
Couldn't believe it was still standing when I came up. You know, there's only 2 inches of mast holding it together, that's it.
Despite the rig trouble, Steve Ashley and Craig Tockler were optimistic about the future of the race.
It's definitely a challenge, there's no doubt about it. To sail two-handed around your own country, 2,300 miles, whatever it is, it's a real buzz when you're finished. You know, you feel like you've really done something.
I think it'll, after this one, and from what we tell the other boaties around, you know, how the Stewart Island people look after you, I think you'll find that just coming down here alone's worth it for the hospitality. And I think really that will take off.
With Prospector expected tonight, only Olsen Everson has yet to make it to Auckland. Provisionally, the overall line honours go as expected to Provincial Cowboy. But despite the rig failure, Cannon head office did secure the all-important handicap win. And with the success of this first ever round New Zealand race, it's a pretty good chance that the event will happen again.